Every morning at Horizon Expeditions, while most guides checked their GPS devices and scrolled through weather apps, Chen was already at work. By 6 a.m., she'd have her paper maps spread across the planning table, meticulously marking routes. With colored pencils and noting weather patterns from the previous day, her movements deliberate and thoughtful. The ritual meant something to her, honoring skills passed down through generations. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The other guides barely noticed her. To them, she was just the logistics coordinator who prepared their equipment, charged their satellite phones, and made sure their high-tech gear functioned properly. Roger Davis, the lead expedition coordinator, treated her like an outdated relic that occasionally needed to be tolerated. Chen, make sure those GPS units are fully charged before the afternoon trek. Davis would bark, never bothering to look at her directly. And leave the route planning to qualified personnel. Those paper maps are for decorating museum walls. Maya would nod silently, taking the devices to her workstation. She'd check each GPS unit with the same care a concert pianist might show a Steinway. Her hands moved with practiced familiarity, checking every battery level, every software update. The guides who watched assumed it was just thoroughness. They had no idea she was mentally comparing each digital route against the natural landmarks, water sources, and elevation changes that could make or break an expedition in challenging conditions. During lunch breaks, while others gathered around, picnic tables sharing stories about weekend adventures and showing off their latest tech gadgets, Maya sat alone with weather almanacs or topographical surveys that reminded her of home. She'd grown up in the mountains of northern Montana, where her grandmother had taught her that reading the land meant survival and patience meant everything. "Hey, Chen," called out Jake Morrison, a cocky 24-year-old from San Francisco who'd barely completed his basic wilderness certification. "You ever actually use those fancy compasses you're always polishing, or just pretend they still matter?" His friends laughed. Maya looked up from the map she was annotating, offered a small smile, and returned to her work. Let them think what they wanted. Her grandmother had always told her that true navigators didn't need to announce their skills who wouldn't understand anyway. The truth was, Maya Chen had been reading landscapes and navigating without technology since she was 8 years old. Every summer for 12 years, her grandmother, a woman whose wilderness experience was so extensive that even park rangers sought her advice, had taken her deep into the Montana wilderness. She taught Maya to read cloud patterns for weather predictions, to calculate position by the angle of the sun, to navigate at night using stars as reliable as any satellite. But Horizon Expeditions didn't care about traditional methods or family wisdom. They cared about certifications, technical training records, and documented qualifications with the latest equipment. Maya had the skills but lacked the interest in showcasing them, so she accepted the role they gave her. Invisible support staff who maintained equipment for real guides. The irony wasn't lost on her. She watched them waste battery power on routes she could navigate in her sleep. Some struggled with basic terrain association techniques her grandmother had drilled into her before she could ride a bicycle. But she remained silent, did her job, served without recognition. Davis seemed to take particular pleasure in reminding her of her place. "You're not certified on any of these navigation systems, Chen. Your job is maintenance, not expedition leadership. Leave the orienteering to people who actually know what they're doing." What Davis didn't know, what none of them knew, was that Maya's quiet demeanor wasn't from incompetence. It was from confidence. Her grandmother had taught her that true navigators didn't boast about their skills. They simply performed when performance mattered. And deep down, Maya suspected that day was coming soon. The rumors started 3 weeks later, spreading through the company like wildfire. Word was that Maya had failed her digital navigation certification badly. Morrison, who seemed to make it his personal mission to ensure everyone knew about her supposed inadequacies, was more than happy to share the details. "Basic GPS waypoint navigation," he announced during the morning briefing, loud enough for half the room to hear. She couldn't even plot a simple route. Davis had to stop the test early because she was embarrassing herself. The story grew with each telling. By the time it reached the equipment room, Maya had supposedly broken the expensive GPS unit. By evening, she'd allegedly started crying when asked to perform a simple coordinate lookup. The narrative was always the same: the old-school enthusiast who thought she could play with modern technology had been humiliated. Davis did nothing to discourage the gossip. If anything, he seemed to enjoy it. "Chen's good at one thing," he'd tell anyone who'd listen: making equipment look pretty. But using it properly, that's a different skill set entirely. What none of them noticed was how Maya reacted when she watched their training sessions. Every time a guide plotted an inefficient route, her jaw would tighten almost imperceptibly. When they struggled with terrain association or failed to account for seasonal water sources, she'd frown slightly, like someone watching a mechanic use the wrong tool for a simple job. Layla Patel, a new communications specialist from Oregon, was one of the few who paid attention. A former park ranger who'd grown up hiking with her father, she recognized real navigation knowledge when she saw it. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "You know something about wilderness navigation," Layla said one afternoon, finding Maya organizing equipment in the Copant in the Faya Wilderness Navigation. Layla said one afternoon, finding Maya organizing equipment in the Faya Winnazing equipment in the Kofa Wilderness in the Kofa Wilderness Navigation storage room. It wasn't a question. Maya looked up, meeting her eyes for a moment before returning to her work. "I know how to organize gear. That's my job." "That's not what I meant." Layla pulled up a chair. "Yesterday, when Parker was plotting that route through Cascade Valley, you shook your head before he even finished. You knew he was going to miss that seasonal creek and send the clients on a 2-hour detour. Lucky guess." "No," Layla said firmly. "You were reading the topographical lines, calculating water runoff patterns with the recent rainfall. I saw you doing the math in your head. My father used to do the same thing before satellite navigation existed." Maya's hands stilled on the compass she was calibrating. For just a moment, her careful mask slipped, and Layla caught a glimpse of something deeper. Knowledge, experience, maybe even pain. "Your father sounds like a wise man," Maya said finally. That evening, Layla's curiosity got the better of her. She had access to personnel files through her communications role, and something about Maya Chen didn't add up. The woman was too calm, too knowledgeable, too comfortable with wilderness navigation to be just an equipment coordinator. The file was mostly standard information, basic training records, certification completions, previous employers, but buried in the electronic records was a single line that made Layla's blood run cold. Restricted reference: Yellowstone. Blizzard Incident, 2019. Contact Director Sarah Winters. National Park Service Emergency Response. Clearance Level 2 required. Layla stared at the screen. The Yellowstone Blizzard Incident. Everyone in the outdoor industry knew that name. The freak storm that stranded 43 tourists across 6 different locations. The rescue operation that seemed impossible until, somehow, against all odds, every single person was found alive. One of the most miraculous rescue efforts in Park Service history. What was an equipment coordinator doing with personnel records connected to a legendary rescue operation? Before she could dig deeper, the file locked her out, but the seed was planted. Maya Chen wasn't who she appeared to be, and Layla had a feeling that everyone at Horizon Expeditions was about to find out exactly who they'd been underestimating. The next morning brought news that would change everything. Horizon Expeditions was hosting a distinguished visitor, and there would be a navigation challenge, a 5-day wilderness expedition through notoriously difficult terrain that had half the company's guides nervous and excited. None of them suspected that the quiet woman charging their GPS units was about to turn their world upside down. But Layla was beginning to understand that sometimes the most resourceful people were the ones nobody noticed. The announcement came during the morning meeting, delivered by CEO Timothy Reynolds himself. Attention everyone. We have the honor of hosting Director Sarah Winters from the National Park Service next week for a wilderness navigation demonstration. This is an opportunity to showcase the exceptional training and capability of Horizon's finest guides. A buzz of excitement rippled through the room. Director Winters was a living legend, the architect of modern wilderness rescue protocols, and the kind of outdoor professional that other guides told stories about. For most of them, this would be the chance of a lifetime. Roger Davis practically glowed with anticipation. This was his company, his team, his moment to shine in front of outdoor industry royalty. He spent the rest of the day making preparations, selecting his best guides, and ensuring all the latest navigation technology was functioning perfectly. "Chen," he barked as Maya calibrated a compass, "I want every GPS unit and satellite phone spotless next week. And stay out of the way during the demonstration. This is for qualified personnel only." But Davis wasn't finished. Over the next few hours, his casual dismissiveness evolved into something more pointed, more cruel. Maybe it was the pressure of the upcoming demonstration. Or maybe he'd simply decided that having a failed navigation trainee on his team was an embarrassment he couldn't tolerate. "You know what, Chen?" he said, loud enough for everyone in the equipment room to hear. "Maybe you should just stay home. Next week, I don't want our distinguished visitor seeing someone who can't even qualify on basic GPS operations. It might reflect poorly on the company." The room went quiet. This wasn't just casual teasing anymore. Davis was publicly humiliating her. Several guides looked uncomfortable, but none spoke up. The chain of command was clear, and challenging the expedition coordinator wasn't something junior guides did. Lightly, Maya's hands never stopped moving as she checked the satellite phone in front of her. But Layla noticed her knuckles had gone whiter on the device. "Actually," Davis continued, warming to his theme, "I'm thinking we need to have a conversation with Mr. Reynolds about your continued employment with this company. Someone who can't handle basic digital navigation probably shouldn't be maintaining expedition equipment." Now he'd crossed a line, threatening her job, her career, her ability to work in the industry she loved. That was more than casual harassment. That was destroying someone's livelihood out of petty cruelty. Maya set down the satellite phone and looked up at Davis for the first time in weeks. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that made several people in the room shift uncomfortably. "Mr. Davis, I'll be here next week as ordered. Maintaining equipment is my assigned duty, and I take my duties seriously." "Your duties," Davis sneered, "are whatever I say they are. And next week, your duty is to stay invisible and let real guides do real work." That night, Maya sat alone in her apartment, staring at a framed photo of her grandmother. The old woman had taught her that some challenges found you whether you sought them or not. She'd also taught her that when those challenges came, you faced them with honor, precision, and absolute commitment. Maya opened her closet and pulled out something she hadn't touched in months. A worn leather case containing her personal navigation tools, a brass compass that had belonged to her great-grandfather, a collection of paper maps annotated with generations of family knowledge, and a journal filled with handwritten notes about natural navigation techniques passed down through her family for over a century. Next week, Director Winters would be watching. And whether Davis liked it or not, Maya Chen was going to be there, ready to serve in whatever capacity was required. She'd spent months being invisible, accepting disrespect, tolerating humiliation. But next week was different. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. Real navigators don't boast about their skills. Maya, they just perform when performance matters. Next week, performance would matter. And Roger Davis was about to learn that some people's silence wasn't weakness. It was patience waiting for the right moment to be revealed. The morning of the demonstration dawned cold and foggy, challenging. Conditions for navigation. Maya arrived at the base camp before anyone else, as usual. Today she carried an extra bag alongside her standard equipment kit. She set up her maintenance station at the edge of the staging area, just as Davis had ordered, but her eyes kept drifting to the mist-covered mountains in the distance. By 9 a.m., Horizon's best guides had assembled. The challenge was elite. Traverse 30 miles of Montana wilderness with minimal equipment, locating checkpoints along the way. Master Guide Thompson, who'd won 3 national orienteering competitions. Senior Guide Rodriguez, fresh back from advanced GPS training. Lead Navigator Kim, who'd served 2 tours with search and rescue. These were outdoor professionals whose entire careers revolved around wilderness navigation. Davis strutted around like a peacock, inspecting equipment and barking orders. Remember, people, we're representing the entire company today. I expect nothing less than perfection. At 9:57 a.m., a black SUV pulled up to the base camp. Director Sarah Winters stepped out, and every guide snapped to attention. She was smaller than Maya had expected, maybe 5'6", with silver hair and a lined face. That spoke of decades making life-or-death decisions in the wilderness. Her jacket displayed patches from national parks across the country, a visual history of American conservation efforts over the past 30 years. But what struck Maya most was her eyes. They swept across the assembled guides with professional assessment, then landed on her. For just a moment, so brief that anyone else would have missed it, something flickered in her expression. Recognition? Surprise? Maya couldn't tell. At ease, Winters said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that came from leading people through disaster zones and bringing them home alive. I'm here to observe, not interfere. Please continue with your demonstration. The challenge began. One by one, Horizon's finest guides took their positions and prepared their equipment. The plan was simple but demanding. Navigate to 5 checkpoints across challenging terrain, demonstrating different navigation techniques at each location. The weather was tricky, fog reducing visibility to less than 50 yards in some places, with weather reports indicating potential storms moving in from the northwest. Not ideal conditions, but realistic for wilderness professionals. Master Guide Thompson went first. His route planning was impressive, programming waypoints into his GPS with practiced efficiency. But 20 minutes into his first leg, the communication team reported he had missed the first checkpoint by nearly half a mile. Senior Guide Rodriguez followed, managing to locate the first checkpoint, but then struggling with the second, where the terrain grew more complex and GPS signals grew weaker. In the deep valley, each attempt brought a tighter frown to Davis's face. This was supposed to be a showcase, not a demonstration of near misses and technology limitations. Lead Navigator Kim stepped up for her attempt, and Maya found herself unconsciously analyzing her preparation, her equipment checks, the way she was planning her route. Her strategy was solid, but Maya noticed she wasn't accounting for the seasonal drainage patterns that had altered the landscape since the topographical data was last updated. Kim's voice crackled over the radio an hour later. Base, I'm at coordinates. That should be checkpoint 3, but there's no marker. The terrain doesn't match my map data. Challenging conditions, Director Winters observed mildly, but Maya caught the undertone. She wasn't impressed. As the challenge continued, with guide after guide struggling to reconcile their digital navigation with the actual landscape, especially as the weather deteriorated, Maya noticed something else. Director Winters' attention kept drifting to her Not obviously, the woman was too professional for that, but Maya had spent enough time being invisible to recognize when someone was quietly observing her. Finally, after 8 attempts and only 2 fully completed routes, Davis was sweating despite the cold mountain air. "Ma'am, these are exceptionally difficult conditions," he began. "The fog has been reducing visibility all morning, and the satellite—" "Mr. Davis," Winters interrupted gently, "I've seen navigation in conditions that would make today look like a stroll through Central Park. The issue isn't the weather." The rebuke was polite but devastating. Davis's face went red, and Maya could see him scrambling for a way to salvage the situation. That's when Winters looked directly at her for the first time. "Young lady, you've been watching very intently. What's your assessment of the navigation challenges?" Every head at the base camp turned to stare at Maya. Davis looked like he might have a stroke. "Sir, she's just equipment maintenance." "She doesn't. I asked her, Mr. Davis." Winters's tone was still mild, but it carried the weight of command that made Davis shut his mouth immediately. Maya stood slowly, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "The fog is creating visibility issues, ma'am, but the bigger problem is that last month's flash floods changed the drainage patterns in the Eastern Valley. The digital maps haven't been updated, so everyone's GPS is showing terrain that no longer exists. Also, the incoming storm front is creating magnetic anomalies that are affecting compass readings by about 4 degrees. A murmur ran through the assembled guides. This was technical knowledge that most of them hadn't even considered. Davis looked like he'd been slapped. Director Winters nodded slowly. "Interesting assessment. Very detailed." She paused, studying Maya's face. "What's your name?" "Maya Chen, ma'am." "Well, Ms. Chen, since you seem to understand the conditions so well, perhaps you'd like to demonstrate proper navigation techniques under these circumstances." "Miss Chen, why didn't you report this harassment through proper channels?" Maya had been dreading this question. "Sir, I was trying to serve quietly. I hoped that if I did my job well and stayed out of the way, the situation would resolve itself." "That's not how this company works," Reynolds replied firmly. "When you're being mistreated, you have an obligation to speak up. Not just for yourself, but for every employee who might face similar treatment in the future." Director Winters spoke up. "Mr. Reynolds, if I may, Maya's approach to dealing with adversity has always been unique. During the Yellowstone blizzard, she volunteered for the most dangerous navigation assignment, provided guidance for the entire operation, and then refused commendation because she said she was just doing her job. She's never been comfortable with recognition." "Nevertheless," Reynolds continued, "this situation is unacceptable. Mr. Davis, you're relieved of your position as Expedition Coordinator effective immediately. You'll report to HR for reassignment and sensitivity training. Your performance review will reflect today's revelations." Davis nodded stiffly. His career wasn't over, but it had just taken a devastating hit that would follow him for years. "Miss Chen," Reynolds continued, "I'm recommending you for immediate promotion to senior guide and reassignment to a position more appropriate for your experience level. We also need to discuss correcting your service record to properly reflect your wilderness rescue experience." "Sir," Maya said carefully, "I requested the transfer to equipment maintenance work. I'm content with my current position." Content or not, Horizon Expeditions has invested significant resources in our reputation for excellence, and we're not utilizing your capabilities effectively. Reynolds turned to Winters. "Director, do you have any recommendations?" Winters smiled slightly. "Actually, I do. The National Park Service has been looking for experienced personnel to develop new training protocols for wilderness navigation. Someone with Maya's combination of traditional skills and real-world rescue experience would be invaluable." The suggestion hung in the air. It would mean leaving Horizon, leaving the quiet maintenance work she'd found peaceful, and returning to a world that revolved around teaching others how to navigate in life or death situations. But it would also mean helping other wilderness professionals develop skills that might save countless lives. Maya looked around the room at the faces of guides who'd spent months dismissing her, who now looked at her with respect and something approaching awe. She thought about her grandmother's lessons about service, about using your gifts to help others. "I'd be honored to consider such an assignment, ma'am." As the meeting concluded, staff members filed out quietly, many stopping to offer Maya personal apologies. Morrison lingered longest. "Miss Chen, I owe you more than an apology. I was wrong about everything, and I'm ashamed of how I acted." Maya studied his face, seeing genuine remorse. "We all make assumptions, Morrison. The question is what we do when we discover we're wrong. I'd like to learn from you, if you're willing to teach." "Everyone deserves a second chance to prove their character," she replied, "including me." That evening, as Maya organized her navigation tools one last time in the equipment room, she reflected on the day's events. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, new opportunities to serve. But tonight she was content knowing that sometimes the most important journeys were won not with technology, but with quiet dignity and the courage to be exactly who you were meant to be. 3 weeks later, Maya found herself at Grand Teton National Park, walking through the halls of the Wilderness Navigation Training Center. The building hummed with quiet intensity. This was where the Park Service's most elite wilderness professionals came to push the boundaries of what was possible in natural navigation and rescue operations. Director Marcus Webb, the training center commander, greeted her personally. A compact man with intelligent eyes and calloused hands that spoke of decades exploring wilderness areas across the continent. He had read her complete file, including the classified portions that had remained hidden at Horizon Expeditions. "Miss Chen," he said, using her new title of navigation specialist, "I'll be honest with you. When Director Winters recommended you for this position, I was skeptical. Teaching wilderness navigation isn't just about being able to read the land yourself. It's about understanding how to transfer complex skills to rangers who may never have your natural ability." They walked through the facility, past indoor training areas where rangers practiced with equipment that represented both cutting-edge technology and time-tested traditional methods. Through soundproof glass, Maya watched instructors working with small groups, demonstrating techniques that she recognized from her grandmother's training and her own rescue experience. "Your assignment," Webb continued, "will be developing curriculum for what we're calling the Integrated Navigation Program. Too many of our wilderness professionals have excellent technical skills with GPS systems, but lack the fundamental understanding of natural navigation that could save their lives when technology fails. Based on your rescue record and your unique approach to wilderness navigation, we think you might have insights that could benefit the entire service." Maya paused at a window overlooking an outdoor training area, where rangers were attempting to navigate a complex course using only natural landmarks. She could see immediately what they were doing wrong, rushing their observations, fighting against the natural indicators instead of working with them, focusing on the destination instead of the journey. "Permission to ask a question, sir?" "Of course." "Are we training them to be better technologists or better navigators?" Webb stopped walking. The question cut to the heart of something he'd been wrestling with throughout his career. "What's the difference? A technologist focuses on the device. A navigator focuses on understanding the land. Sometimes that requires technology. Sometimes it requires looking at cloud formations, feeling the wind, or listening to birds. The difference is everything." For the first time since they'd met, Webb smiled. "Director Winters said you'd have a unique perspective. I think she understated it." Over the following weeks, Maya threw herself into her new role with the same quiet intensity she had brought to equipment maintenance. But now, instead of charging GPS units, She was developing training protocols that emphasized decision-making alongside technology. Her first class consisted of 12 rangers, all experienced wilderness professionals who'd been selected for advanced training. Ranger Jennifer Kim, recently arrived from Yosemite, looked skeptical as Maya introduced herself. "I'm not here to teach you how to use GPS," Maya began. "You already know how to use GPS. I'm here to teach you how to think when your GPS fails." She led them through exercises that had nothing to do with electronic devices, reading weather patterns from cloud formations, identifying direction from plant growth, understanding terrain through sound reflection, calculating position from natural markers. "Every navigation decision has consequences beyond the immediate journey," she explained during one session. "In the wilderness, you're not just plotting routes on screens. You're making decisions that affect lives, rescue operations, entire communities. The technical skill is meaningless without the wisdom to use it appropriately and to know when not to rely on it at all." Ranger Kim approached her after the third day of training. "Ma'am, this isn't like any navigation course I've ever taken." "Good. How do you feel about that, honestly?" "It's harder than I expected. You're making us think about things that most instructors never mention. Like yesterday, when you asked us to navigate without looking at the ground, only at the sky and vegetation." "I've been thinking about that concept for hours." Maya nodded. "That's the point. Anyone can follow a blinking dot on a screen. But knowing how to find your way when that screen goes dark, that's what separates good rangers from exceptional ones." Word of her unconventional teaching methods spread quickly through the National Park Service. Other instructors began requesting copies of her curriculum. Senior officials who'd heard about the Wilderness Whisperer started attending her sessions as observers. But the real validation came from her students. Rangers who completed her program didn't just navigate more accurately, they made better decisions under pressure. They understood their role in the larger ecosystem. They carried themselves with the quiet confidence that came from knowing they were prepared for whatever nature might throw at them. Late one evening, as Maya reviewed performance reports from her latest class, she found a handwritten note that had been slipped under her office door. "Ma'am, my grandfather always said that the best teachers are the ones who change how you think, not just what you know. Thank you for helping me understand that being a ranger is about more than following electronic paths through the wilderness." Specialist Layla Patel. Maya smiled, recognizing the name. Layla had transferred to Grand Teton specifically to take her course, having been one of the few people at Horizon who'd recognized there was more to Maya than met the eye. As she turned off her office lights and headed home, Maya reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. From mountain explorations with her grandmother, through the hell of the Yellowstone blizzard, to the quiet service of equipment maintenance, and now to shaping the next generation of wilderness navigators. Each phase had taught her something different about service, about sacrifice, about the responsibility that came with specialized knowledge. But perhaps the most important lesson was one her grandmother had taught her years ago. True navigation wasn't about how much technology you could bring to bear, but about knowing when technology was necessary and when ancient wisdom was wiser. Tomorrow would bring new students, new challenges, new opportunities to serve. But tonight she was content knowing that her grandmother's lessons lived on in every ranger she trained, and that sometimes the most important journeys were the ones you helped others navigate successfully. 6 months into her assignment at Grand Teton, Maya received an unexpected visitor. She was reviewing training schedules in her office when her assistant knocked on the door. "Ma'am, there's a Director Winters here to see you." Director Winters entered with the same quiet authority Maya remembered from Horizon expeditions, but now her face carried a smile of genuine pride. "Navigation Specialist Chen, I hope you don't mind the unannounced visit. I was in the area and wanted to see how you were settling in." They walked through the facility together, observing classes in session. In one room, rangers were practicing what Maya called technology failure exercises that required them to accomplish specific navigation objectives after simulated GPS malfunctions. Your program has generated quite a bit of discussion in Department of Interior circles, Winters observed. Initial reports suggest that Rangers completing your training show 60% better survival rates in simulated emergency situations compared to traditional navigation programs. Maya watched through the observation window as one of her students, faced with a complex navigation scenario, chose to use natural indicators rather than rely on potentially compromised GPS data, exactly the kind of critical thinking she'd been trying to instill. "Ma'am, I've been thinking about something you said at Horizon about the cost of rescue operations and choosing when to rely on technology and when to rely on traditional methods. Go on." "I think I spent years believing that my value as a navigator was tied to my ability to find people in impossible conditions. But what I'm learning here is that my real value might be in teaching others to navigate before they need rescuing." Winters nodded slowly. "The Yellowstone blizzard was extraordinary, Maya. What you did saved lives. But you're right. Teaching Rangers to make better decisions might save even more lives in the long run." They paused outside a classroom where Ranger Kim was leading a discussion about the ethics of wilderness navigation. The conversation was complex, nuanced, exactly the kind of thinking that separated professional wilderness navigators from casual hikers. "There's something else," Winters continued. "The Park Service is considering expanding your program service-wide. They want to integrate traditional navigation methods and critical thinking into all wilderness training." The implications hit Maya immediately. Her grandmother's lessons, learned in the Montana wilderness, refined through rescue experience, and tempered by the wisdom that came from understanding the true cost of technology dependency, would become part of how America trained its wilderness professionals. "Ma'am, that's an incredible responsibility." "Yes, it is. But you've already proven you can handle incredible responsibilities. The question is whether you're ready to step into a larger role. We're talking about a promotion to training director and assignment to head a new department focusing on integrated navigation methodology." That evening, Maya sat in her small cabin, staring at the framed photo of her grandmother that had traveled with her from position to position. She died 2 years after the Yellowstone blizzard, proud of her granddaughter but worried about the burden she carried from that operation. Now Maya wondered what she'd think about this new opportunity. Her phone buzzed with a text message from Leela Patel. "Ma'am, heard the news about the program expansion. My entire district is requesting your training. You're changing how we think about being wilderness professionals." More messages followed. Rangers from her classes sharing stories about how her teaching had influenced their decisions in the field. Training officers reporting improved performance from personnel who'd completed her program. Even International Park Service is expressing interest in her curriculum. The mountain navigator's granddaughter had found her true calling, and it wasn't just in reading the wilderness herself. It was in teaching others to understand the delicate balance between technology and tradition. The next morning, Maya found herself back at the outdoor training area where she'd first observed Rangers months earlier. But instead of watching from a window, she stood before a group of young wilderness professionals, teaching them to read cloud patterns, understand terrain features, and most importantly, understand themselves. "Remember," she told them, "navigation isn't just about finding your way from point A to point B. It's about choosing the right path at the right time for the right reasons. Your skill with technology is meaningless if you don't have wisdom in your judgment." A young ranger raised her hand. "Ma'am, how do you know when you're making the right navigation decision in a high-stress situation?" Maya smiled, hearing her grandmother's voice in the question. "You prepare beforehand by thinking through scenarios, understanding your environment, and practicing good decision-making when the stakes are low. When the pressure hits, you don't rise to the occasion. You fall back on your level of preparation." As the class continued, Maya noticed movement at the edge of the training area. Roger Davis from Horizon Expeditions was standing there, apparently having traveled to Grand Teton specifically to see her. When the training session ended, he approached hesitantly. "Miss Chen, I know I have no right to ask for your time, but I was hoping we could talk." They walked to a quiet overlook with a view of the magnificent Teton Range. Davis looked older, humbled by the events that had cost him his position and damaged his career. "I came to apologize," he said simply. "Not just for how I treated you, but for what I failed to learn from you. I spent months working alongside someone who could have made me a better guide, a better leader, a better person. Instead, I let my biases blind me to an opportunity that will never come again." Maya studied his face, seeing genuine remorse. "We all make mistakes, Mr. Davis. The question is what we do with the lessons they teach us. I've requested transfer to a training unit. I want to learn to teach wilderness skills the way you do, with respect, with understanding, with focus on making people better navigators as well as better human beings. That's a worthy goal." Davis hesitated, then continued, "There's something else. Morrison sends his regards. He completed Advanced Wilderness Leadership last month. Top of his class. He said your example taught him that quiet competence was more valuable than technological showboating." The conversation reminded Maya of something her grandmother had often said: influence spreads in ways you never expect. The lessons she'd learned in the Montana wilderness were now shaping wilderness professionals across the country, creating ripples that would extend far beyond anything she could directly observe. As the sun set over the magnificent Teton Range, Maya made her decision about the promotion and expanded role. She would accept, not because she craved recognition or authority, but because her nation's wilderness needed guardians who understood that true navigation came from wisdom, respect for nature, and the courage to make difficult decisions when technology failed. That night, she wrote a letter to her grandmother, as she did every year on the anniversary of her passing. "Grandma, remember how you used to say that the most important compass was the one inside us? I finally understand what you meant. Teaching rangers to think clearly, act with respect for the land, and choose their paths wisely, that might be the most important navigation lesson of all. The mountain wisdom you taught me isn't just living on in me anymore. It's living on in every ranger I train, and it will live on in everyone those rangers guide to safety. Your legacy isn't just in the lives I helped save during the Yellowstone blizzard. It's in all the wilderness emergencies that won't happen because professionals learn to navigate with both technology and tradition. I think you'd be proud of that." 6 months later, when the National Park Service officially announced the new Department of Integrated Wilderness Navigation, the press release included a quote from its director, Maya Chen. "Our goal isn't to create better technologists. It's to create better navigators, professionals who understand that true precision extends far beyond satellite systems. It includes wisdom and judgment, respect for traditional methods, and understanding when technology is essential and when ancient knowledge is wiser." The quiet woman who had once been dismissed as just equipment maintenance had become one of the most influential wilderness trainers in the modern conservation movement. The storm continued through the night. Maya and Blackwell talked for hours while the team rested, exchanging experiences, challenging assumptions, finding common ground between technological precision and intuitive understanding. By dawn, the storm had passed, leaving behind a transformed landscape of glistening wet rocks and swollen streams. It had also transformed something within the relationship between these two wilderness professionals. "We'll need to adjust our return route," Blackwell said, studying the terrain with new eyes. "That valley will be flooded and the usual crossing points compromised." Maya watched as the commander made calculations not based on digital waypoints, but on direct observation of water flow, soil stability, and natural indicators. She was applying the principles of integrated navigation instinctively now, blending her technical knowledge with newly awakened perception. "Lead the way," Maya said simply. "I'll follow." The journey back became not a test but a collaboration, two navigation philosophies working in harmony. When they finally reached base camp, the other trainers and teams greeted them with relief and admiration. At the debriefing session that afternoon, Commander Blackwell stood before her fellow Rangers, her uniform still bearing the mud stains of their adventure. "I've spent 20 years believing that technological advancement was always the answer to wilderness challenges," she began. "Last night taught me the limitation of that thinking. When everything failed, and it did fail catastrophically, what saved us wasn't a backup battery. It was our ability to read the land directly, to understand its patterns, to think with both analysis and intuition." She glanced at Maya. "I still believe in technology as a powerful tool. But Ms. Chen's program has shown me that tools are only as good as the minds wielding them. True navigation mastery isn't about having the best equipment. It's about having the best relationship with your environment, technological and natural." The transformation in Commander Blackwell rippled through the training program. As the most experienced and initially most skeptical participant, her endorsement carried tremendous weight. The remaining days of training saw a remarkable shift in attitude, from compliance to commitment, from skepticism to synthesis. On the final evening, the Rangers gathered around a campfire, sharing stories of their own technology failures and moments of connection with the natural world. Maya listened more than she spoke, recognizing that the true measure of a teacher isn't how much they say, but how much their students discover for themselves. Commander Blackwell approached her as the gathering dispersed. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. "For what?" "For assuming that your methods were about rejecting progress rather than enhancing resilience. I've realized something important. This isn't about choosing between technology and tradition. It's about integrating them thoughtfully." Maya smiled. "That's why we call it integrated navigation, not primitive skills. I'd like to implement a specialized version of your program at Denali," Blackwell continued. "Our terrain presents unique challenges that would benefit from your approach. Would you consider consulting on the adaptation?" The request represented exactly what Maya had hoped for, not mindless replication of her methods, but thoughtful integration into diverse wilderness contexts. Her curriculum wasn't meant to be a rigid doctrine, but a living philosophy that evolved through application. "I'd be honored," she replied. "That's how knowledge grows, through adaptation to new environments." The following month brought unexpected recognition. National Geographic featured Maya's program in a cover story titled "The Navigation Revolution: When Ancient Wisdom Meets Modern Technology." The article detailed how her integrated approach was transforming wilderness safety statistics across the national park system. More significantly, the outdoor equipment industry took notice. Companies that had built their business models on ever-advancing technology began incorporating traditional navigation training into their marketing and educational programs. Rather than seeing Maya's methods as competition, they recognized an opportunity to deepen their customers' relationship with the outdoors. Trevor Williams, CEO of Summit Technologies, the largest manufacturer of wilderness GPS systems in North America, requested a meeting. Maya was initially skeptical. This was, after all, a company with a vested interest in technological dependency. But she agreed, seeing an opportunity to extend her influence beyond the Park Service. They met at a quiet restaurant near Grand Teton National Park. Williams was younger than she expected, perhaps in his early 40s, with the weathered look of someone who actually used the equipment his company produced. "Miss Chen, I'll be direct," he began after introductions. "When your program first gained national attention, our board of directors saw it as a potential threat, a movement away from the high-tech solutions we've built our business around." Maya nodded. She'd expected as much. But I've been following your actual curriculum, not just the headlines about it. And I've come to believe you're not anti-technology at all. You're pro-resilience. That's a fair assessment. Williams leaned forward. Here's my proposal. A joint venture between Summit Technologies and the National Park Service. We develop a next-generation navigation system that actively teaches traditional skills while providing technological backup. A system designed not to replace human judgment, but to enhance it. He slid a tablet across the table, displaying concept designs for what he called the Integrated Navigator, a device that would prompt users to notice natural navigation indicators, gradually reducing its guidance as the user demonstrated. Increasing competence. The goal, he explained, isn't to keep people dependent on our products. It's to help them develop true navigation autonomy while providing a safety net during the learning process. Maya studied the proposal with measured interest. Why this approach? It seems counter to the typical tech industry model of creating perpetual dependency. Williams smiled. 2 reasons. First, it's the right thing to do. I've been lost myself when technology failed, and it's terrifying. Second, it's good business. The outdoor industry is evolving. People don't just want gadgets anymore. They want meaningful experiences and real skills. The proposal represented an unexpected evolution of Maya's vision, not just training park rangers, but potentially influencing how millions of people related to wilderness navigation. The scale was both exhilarating and intimidating. I'll need to review this with Director Webb and our educational team, she said finally. But conceptually, it aligns with our philosophy. Integration rather than opposition. As she left the meeting, Maya reflected on how far her journey had taken her, from the quiet equipment coordinator mocked for her paper maps to someone whose philosophy was influencing corporate strategy at the highest levels of the outdoor industry. Her phone buzzed with a notification from the Park Service emergency system. A family of hikers was overdue from a backcountry trip in the northern section of Grand Teton. The alert included their last known GPS coordinates, but noted that their emergency beacon had stopped transmitting 6 hours earlier. Maya immediately called the search and rescue coordinator. What's the situation with the missing hikers? Family of 4, parents and 2 teenagers, moderate experience level. They were following a popular route, but missed their scheduled check-in. Helicopter search showed no signs along the normal trail. Weather conditions? Clear currently, but a system moving in from the west. We have about 8 hours before conditions deteriorate. Maya made a quick decision. I'm joining the search team. This is exactly the scenario we've been training for. 3 hours later, she was in a command vehicle heading to the search area, reviewing maps and weather data. The family's last known position was at a trail junction where many hikers had been confused by recent storm damage that had obscured the main path. The search coordinator, Ranger James Peterson, outlined the standard protocol. We'll establish a grid search pattern from their last known coordinates, with teams moving outward in expanding sectors. Maya studied the topographical map, her mind processing not just what was on the paper, but what she knew about human behavior when lost. They wouldn't have continued in a random direction, she said. With their level of experience, they would have made certain predictable choices. She pointed to the map. Their GPS would have shown them they were here, trying to reach this campsite. When they lost the trail, they would have attempted to follow the most obvious natural feature, this drainage line, believing it would reconnect them with the main trail. Peterson looked skeptical. That's speculation. Grid search is proven methodology. It is, Maya acknowledged. And we should absolutely implement it. But I'd like to take a small team along this route first. If I'm wrong, we've lost only an hour. If I'm right, we find them before the weather turns. Her reputation earned her the benefit of the doubt. With 2 additional rangers, Maya followed her predicted route, moving quickly but attentively through The forest. She wasn't just looking for the missing hikers. She was looking for the subtle signs of inexperienced people trying to navigate unfamiliar terrain. A broken branch here. A disturbed rock there. The faint impression of footprints leading away from a confusing trail junction. These weren't the obvious blazes of marked trails, but the inadvertent evidence of human passage that most searchers would overlook. They came this way, she said with increasing confidence as the signs accumulated, and they continued down toward the creek basin. The team followed her lead, descending into a valley where the vegetation grew thicker and the terrain more challenging. Maya paused occasionally, putting herself in the mindset of lost hikers with failing technology. They would have reached this overlook around dusk, she reasoned aloud. With darkness approaching and their GPS malfunctioning, they would have sought shelter rather than risking further travel. Natural human instinct would direct them toward. She pointed to a rocky outcropping that provided natural shelter from the elements. That's where they would have spent the night. The team altered course, heading toward the formation. As they approached, Maya called out, her voice carrying through the quiet forest. And then, faintly at first, then with growing excitement, came answering calls. The family was exactly where Maya had predicted. Cold, hungry, and frightened, but uninjured. Their GPS had led them off trail before losing satellite reception. Their phone batteries had died, and their emergency beacon had been damaged in a fall. How did you find us? The father asked as the rangers provided food and warm drinks. We were completely off the main trail. We followed your story, not just your last coordinates, Maya explained. When technology fails, humans make predictable choices based on their experience level and the natural features available. You actually made very rational decisions given your circumstances. As they guided the family back to safety, Maya used the opportunity to teach, not just the lost hikers, but the rangers accompanying her. She pointed out the natural navigation markers they could have used, the terrain features that would have oriented them, the subtle signs that would have led them back to established trails. The technology in your pocket is valuable, she told the teenagers who were listening with rapt attention after their ordeal. But the most powerful navigation tool is the one between your ears, and unlike your phone, it doesn't need batteries. Back at headquarters, Ranger Peterson approached her with newfound respect. That wasn't standard search protocol, but it was remarkably effective. How did you know? I didn't know, Maya clarified. I predicted based on patterns of human behavior when technological guidance fails. We've been studying this extensively in our program, the predictable ways people interact with terrain when they shift from following digital instructions to making autonomous decisions. We need to incorporate this into our search and rescue training, Peterson said. It's a completely different approach from our current methodology. Maya nodded. That's exactly what our integrated navigation program is designed to address. Not just how people navigate when everything works, but how they behave when systems fail. Understanding that psychology is as important as understanding the technology itself. That evening, as she updated her training materials with insights from the successful rescue, Maya received an email from Director Winters. The subject line read simply, White House recognition. The message informed her that the Department of the Interior had nominated her integrated navigation program for a Presidential Innovation Award for its transformative impact on wilderness safety. The ceremony would take place in Washington, D.C. the following month. Maya sat back in her chair, momentarily overwhelmed. From equipment coordinator to White House honoree in less than 2 years. The recognition was gratifying, but what moved her most was knowing that her grandmother's wisdom, passed down through generations of mountain people who understood the land in their bones, was now being acknowledged at the highest levels of government. She opened her journal and added a new entry, continuing the ongoing letter to her grandmother. The world is finally recognizing what you always knew. That true navigation isn't about following a line on a screen, but about reading the world directly. Today we found a lost family not because our technology was superior, but because we understood how people behave when technology abandons them. Each rescue, each student who embraces these methods, each life preserved, they're all extensions of those quiet mornings when you taught me to feel the wind and read the clouds. Your legacy grows stronger every day. As she closed the journal, Maya reflected on the long, unexpected journey that had brought her here. From the ridicule at Horizon Expeditions to national recognition. From quiet maintenance work to leading. A movement that was transforming how Americans related to wilderness navigation. Her phone chimed with a weather alert. A major storm system was developing over the Pacific Northwest, potentially affecting multiple national parks in the coming days. Once, such news would have filled her with anxiety, the weight of potential rescue operations heavy on her shoulders. Now she felt something different, confidence not just in her own abilities, but in the growing network of rangers and outdoor professionals trained in integrated navigation. The system she was building wasn't dependent on a single person's extraordinary skills. It was resilient, adaptive, and self-reinforcing. Just like the natural world, it helped people navigate. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the press interviews she still found uncomfortable, the curriculum revisions for winter conditions, the ongoing collaboration with technology companies that recognized the value of her approach. But tonight, she was content knowing that somewhere, rangers were teaching hikers to look up from their screens and read the actual world around them. Some heroes charge into wilderness emergencies to rescue strangers. Others quietly transform how we relate to the wilderness itself, preventing emergencies before they happen. Both kinds of heroes save lives. Both kinds of heroes preserve the wild places we cherish. And sometimes, if they're very fortunate, both kinds of heroes get to see their work recognized not just for what it prevents, but for what it creates. A deeper, more resilient connection between humanity and the natural world. The East Room of the White House gleamed under crystal chandeliers as distinguished guests gathered for the Presidential Innovation Awards. Maya sat uncomfortably in the front row, wearing a Park Service dress uniform that felt stiff compared to her usual field attire. She'd spent the morning rehearsing her brief acceptance speech, hoping to distill years of wilderness wisdom into 2 minutes that might actually change how Americans thought about navigation. "You look like you'd rather be lost in a blizzard," whispered Director Winters, seated beside her. "At least then I'd know what to do," Maya replied with a small smile. The ceremony proceeded with practiced Washington efficiency. Various innovations were recognized: medical breakthroughs, educational initiatives, technological advancements. Then came the wilderness safety category. "Our next honoree has revolutionized how we think about wilderness navigation and safety," the Secretary of the Interior announced. By integrating traditional methods with modern technology, her program has reduced search and rescue incidents by 42% in participating parks while dramatically improving survival rates when emergencies do occur. Please welcome, from the National Park Service, Navigation Specialist Maya Chen. The applause felt surreal as Maya approached the podium. Camera flashes sparked like lightning in a summer storm. She took a deep breath and found her center, just as her grandmother had taught her to do when facing any challenge. "Thank you for this honor," she began. "But the innovation we're celebrating today isn't actually new. It's ancient wisdom, rediscovered and reintegrated into our modern relationship with wilderness." She paused, making eye contact with the audience. For thousands of years, humans navigated the world by reading natural signs: the position of the sun, the pattern of stars, the growth of vegetation, the behavior of animals. These weren't primitive approximations waiting for GPS to replace them. They were sophisticated systems perfectly adapted to their environments. The room had gone quiet, executives and officials leaning forward slightly. "What we've done is," Simply this. We've recognized that true resilience comes not from perfect technology, but from multiple, overlapping systems. When your GPS fails in the wilderness, and eventually it will, what matters isn't the quality of your device, but the quality of your training. Maya gestured to the medal she just received. This recognition isn't for rejecting technology. It's for remembering that technology works best when it enhances human capability rather than replacing it. Our program teaches wilderness professionals and recreational visitors alike to use everything available, from satellite navigation to the direction moss grows on trees. She smiled, thinking of her grandmother. My greatest teacher never owned a GPS unit. She navigated by a deeper understanding, reading landscapes like most of us read books. She taught me that finding your way isn't about following a line on a screen. It's about relationship with the land itself. As she concluded her speech, Maya noticed something unusual in the audience. People weren't checking their phones or whispering to neighbors. They were fully present, perhaps recognizing something they'd lost in their technology-saturated lives. The wilderness doesn't care about your battery life, she finished. But it does speak a language we can all learn to understand again. Thank you. The applause that followed surprised her with its enthusiasm. As she returned to her seat, the president leaned over to shake her hand. My daughter got lost hiking last year when her phone died, he said quietly. Your program might have prevented that. We're going to make sure every American student gets this training. The words were political, but the sentiment behind them seemed genuine. Maya nodded her thanks, already thinking about how to scale her curriculum for national education. After the ceremony came the media interviews, the part Maya dreaded most. She'd always preferred action to words, direct teaching to public speaking. But she recognized that broader impact required broader communication. A prominent outdoor magazine asked for the first interview. The journalist Rebecca Winters, no relation to the director, had a reputation for thoughtful coverage of conservation issues. Navigation specialist Chen, your program has been called revolutionary, but you describe it as a return to traditional methods. How do you reconcile these perspectives? Maya considered the question carefully. True innovation often comes from reconnection rather than invention. We didn't create new navigation techniques. We remembered essential ones that were being forgotten. The revolution isn't in the methods themselves, but in the integration of ancient and modern approaches. Critics in the technology sector have suggested your program is anti-progress. How do you respond? I'd invite those critics to actually examine our curriculum, Maya replied. We teach GPS usage, satellite navigation, digital mapping, all the modern tools. We just ensure they're not the only tools. That's not anti-progress. It's true progress, building systems with fewer single points of failure. The journalist nodded, making notes. You've declined numerous lucrative offers to commercialize your methods. Why? The question touched on something Maya had struggled with internally. Since the program gained national attention, she'd received partnership proposals from major outdoor retailers, book deals, speaking opportunities, ways to spread her message but also to profit from it. This knowledge doesn't belong to me, she said simply. Much of it comes from indigenous traditions, from mountain communities, from generations of wilderness wisdom. I'm a steward, not an owner. The National Park Service allows me to share these methods without commodifying them. Rebecca studied her thoughtfully. That's unusual in today's world. Perhaps it shouldn't be, Maya suggested. Some forms of knowledge belong to all of us, like the land itself. As the interview concluded, Rebecca asked one final question off the record. The Yellowstone blizzard. There are still unanswered questions about exactly how you managed to coordinate those rescues when all communications and navigation systems failed. Care to elaborate now that the classified details have been released? Maya hadn't expected this. She'd spent years deflecting questions about those 3 harrowing days. The official record is accurate, she said carefully. When the systems failed, we relied on traditional methods. But the distances involved, the precision of your directions. Some people in the rescue community still can't explain it. Maya looked out the window at the Washington Monument in the distance. There are moments, she said finally, when our connection to the land becomes something more than technical skill. My grandmother called it wilderness integration. A state where you don't just read the landscape, you become part of its patterns. I can't explain it scientifically. I can only teach others to cultivate that relationship for themselves. Rebecca nodded, understanding she'd received a rare glimpse behind Maya's professional facade. Thank you for your honesty. Following the White House ceremony, Maya embarked on a national tour of parks and wilderness areas, demonstrating integrated navigation techniques to rangers and public visitors alike. The hands-on teaching, rather than the speeches and interviews, was where she felt most alive. At Olympic National Park in Washington, she led 50 participants into a fog-shrouded rainforest, teaching them to navigate by the feel of prevailing winds and the growth patterns of moss. In the Everglades, she demonstrated how to read water currents and animal behavior as directional indicators. At Acadia, she taught night navigation using only stars and shoreline sounds. Each environment required different techniques, different sensory awareness. This wasn't a one-size-fits-all approach, but a fundamental shift in relationship with natural environments. The most meaningful stop came at Yellowstone, the site of the blizzard that had defined her early career and nearly ended it. She hadn't returned since transferring to equipment maintenance years earlier. Standing at the visitor center where the ill-fated tours had departed that snowy day brought a flood of memories, both triumphant and traumatic. Director Winters had accompanied her for this particular visit, understanding its significance. "Are you okay?" she asked quietly as they watched rangers gathering for the training session. "I'm not sure," Maya admitted. "This place holds complicated memories. You saved 43 lives here, and I nearly broke myself doing it." Maya's voice dropped. 3 days without sleep, making decisions that determined whether people lived or died. "I was 26 years old," Winters nodded. "That's why you requested transfer afterwards. Not because you failed, but because the weight of success was too heavy." "Something like that. And now?" Maya considered the question, watching the diverse group of professionals preparing to learn from her. "Now I understand something I didn't then. No single person should carry that kind of responsibility alone. That's why this program matters. It distributes the knowledge, creates resilience beyond any individual." The Yellowstone training took on special significance, conducted in locations where Maya had coordinated rescues years earlier. Rangers absorbed her techniques with particular intensity, knowing they were learning from someone who had actually used these methods to save lives in their park. On the final day, an unexpected visitor joined the group, Roger Davis, her former supervisor from Horizon Expeditions. The man who had once mocked her traditional methods now stood respectfully at the back of the group, taking notes like a first-year ranger. During a break, he approached hesitantly. "I wasn't sure you'd remember me. I remember everyone who told me paper maps belonged in museums, Mr. Davis." He winced at the reminder. "I deserve that. I'm with the National Outdoor Leadership School now, developing curriculum for youth wilderness education. Your methods are revolutionizing our approach." "I'm glad to hear it. There's something else," he continued. "My son got lost in the Tetons last year, a day hike that went wrong when weather moved in. One of your trainees found him using natural navigation techniques when the helicopter search couldn't fly." The personal connection surprised her. Davis wasn't just acknowledging her professional impact, but a direct effect on his family. "I'm glad he was found safely." "Because of you," Davis said simply. "Not directly, but through the people you've trained. I don't expect forgiveness for how I treated you, but I wanted you to know that your work saved someone precious to me." The moment represented a kind of closure, not through apologies or grand gestures, but through this simple acknowledgement. That knowledge, properly shared, extends beyond personal conflicts to serve greater needs. That evening, Maya met with the Yellowstone superintendent to discuss implementing her program permanently at the park. As they walked the grounds near Old Faithful, the conversation turned to broader impacts. "We're tracking interesting data beyond the safety statistics," the superintendent noted. "Visitors who take your navigation workshops spend more time looking at actual landscapes and less at screens. They report higher satisfaction with their park experience. They notice details they would have missed." "That doesn't surprise me," Maya replied. "Navigating by natural features requires a different kind of attention, more immersive, more connected." "Exactly. We're seeing a qualitative shift in how people experience wilderness, not just how safely they move through it. This unintended consequence, changing not just how people navigated, but how they related to natural environments, had emerged consistently across parks. By teaching practical skills, Maya's program was inadvertently addressing a deeper disconnection between modern humans and the landscapes they inhabited. The implications extended beyond navigation or even wilderness safety. In a world increasingly mediated through screens and sensors, her work was rekindling direct perception, teaching people to trust their senses, to observe closely, to feel part of natural systems rather than separate from them. Following the Yellowstone visit, Maya returned to Grand Teton to find an unexpected invitation waiting. The United Nations Environmental Program was hosting a global conference on climate resilience and indigenous knowledge systems. They wanted her to deliver a keynote address about traditional navigation as a model for integration of ancient and modern approaches to environmental challenges. The international recognition was flattering but intimidating. Maya had become comfortable teaching rangers and hikers, but addressing global policymakers was entirely different territory. "You should accept," urged Director Webb when she brought him the invitation. "Your work has implications far beyond navigation. It's about resilience in complex systems, about balancing technological and traditional knowledge." "I'm not a policy expert or an academic," Maya protested. "I'm a practical instructor." "Exactly why your voice matters," Webb insisted. "Too many theoretical approaches, not enough practical wisdom. These people need to hear from someone who has actually integrated these knowledge systems on the ground." After considerable reflection, Maya accepted the invitation. The conference would be held in Norway, bringing together environmental leaders from 130 countries. Her preparation was characteristically thorough, not practicing speeches, but deepening her understanding of how navigation principles applied to broader environmental challenges. The conference center in Oslo overlooked a spectacular fjord, the ancient landscape a fitting backdrop for discussions about timeless knowledge. Maya's keynote was scheduled for the second day, following presentations on indigenous fire management, traditional water conservation, and historical agricultural practices. When her time came, Maya approached the podium without notes. She had decided against a formal presentation, choosing instead to speak from direct experience, the approach she used in all her teaching. "I am not an indigenous knowledge keeper," she began, acknowledging the traditional wisdom holders in the audience. "I'm a student of integrated knowledge systems, specifically how ancient navigation methods can complement modern technology to create greater resilience." She paced slowly across the stage, comfortable now in her expertise, if not in the setting. "When a hiker's GPS fails in the wilderness, we call it a technology problem. But from another perspective, it's a relationship problem. That hiker hasn't developed a direct relationship with the landscape. They've outsourced their navigation to satellites and algorithms." Heads nodded across the international audience. "This pattern extends far beyond navigation. In domain after domain, we've replaced direct perception and relationship with technological mediation. This creates phenomenal capabilities but also critical vulnerabilities, Maya paused, gathering her thoughts. The approach we've developed doesn't reject technology. It contextualizes it within deeper systems of knowledge. GPS becomes one tool. Among many, not the only tool. When systems fail, as all systems eventually do, alternatives already exist. She described specific examples from her program, how integrated navigation had improved survival rates, reduced search and rescue costs, and enhanced wilderness experiences. But then she pushed beyond her usual territory. The principles we've developed have broader applications. Climate resilience requires exactly this kind of integration, combining the precision of modern science with the time-tested wisdom of communities that have sustained relationship with specific landscapes for thousands of years. The remainder of her address explored these connections, how traditional knowledge systems offered complementary perspectives to scientific approaches, how integration rather than opposition created the most robust solutions to complex challenges. The response was immediate and enthusiastic. Representatives from countries facing severe climate impacts were particularly engaged, recognizing parallels to their own efforts to balance technological solutions with traditional practices. The Norwegian environmental minister approached. Afterward, your navigation program provides a concrete model for what many of us have been attempting more abstractly, true integration of knowledge systems without subordinating one to another. We would like to adapt your methodology to our climate adaptation strategy. Similar requests followed from representatives of a dozen countries. What had begun as a specialized wilderness navigation program was evolving into a broader framework for knowledge integration across environmental domains. That evening, alone in her hotel room overlooking the ancient fjord, Maya reflected on how far her journey had taken her, from the ridiculed equipment coordinator to an internationally recognized voice for integrated knowledge systems. She opened her journal and continued her ongoing letter to her grandmother. I spoke to people from across the world today about the things you taught me in the Montana wilderness. Not just how to find north without a compass or read weather from cloud formations, but something much deeper, how to be in relationship with the land itself. Your teachings have traveled further than either of us could have imagined. But what matters most isn't the recognition or the programs or the policies. It's that people are remembering how to see again, how to feel the land beneath their feet, how to trust their own perceptions alongside their technological tools. In teaching navigation, we're really teaching relationship with the earth, with natural systems, with ancient wisdom, and with our own senses. That's your true legacy. Maya returned from Norway to find a new challenge waiting. The ongoing success of her program had created unprecedented demand, far exceeding what she and her small team could personally deliver. The question of scale had become urgent, how to maintain the quality and integrity of the training while expanding its reach. Director Webb had convened a strategy meeting with key stakeholders from across the National Park Service. The conference room at headquarters was filled with administrators, educators, and field personnel, all grappling with the mechanics of national implementation. We need standardized materials, argued the education director. Consistent curriculum. That can be taught by any qualified ranger. But that's exactly what makes this program different, countered a field trainer. It's not standardized. It adapts to each environment, each group, each teaching moment. Maya listened to the debate, recognizing valid points on both sides. The program's effectiveness came partly from its adaptability and responsiveness, qualities difficult to capture in standardized materials. Yet without some form of codification, its principles couldn't spread beyond direct instruction. When the discussion reached an impasse, all eyes turned to her. What do you think, Maya? How do we scale this without losing its essence? She considered the question carefully. When my grandmother taught me navigation, she didn't give me a manual. She gave me principles, then put me in relationship with different environments where I could apply those principles directly. Heads nodded around the room. I think we're asking the wrong question, she continued. We're asking how to standardize something that's inherently contextual. Instead, we should ask, how do we cultivate the capacity for contextual teaching? In our instructors? Her suggestion shifted the entire conversation. Rather than developing rigid curricula, they began designing a train-the-trainers program that would develop instructors capable of teaching navigation principles adaptively across diverse environments. The approach resonated with the park service's existing expertise in environmental education. Rangers already knew their specific landscapes intimately. They didn't need detailed lesson plans so much as a framework for integrating traditional methods with their existing knowledge. As the meeting concluded, Director Webb pulled Maya aside. This approach means you'll be focusing on developing instructors rather than teaching end users directly. Are you comfortable with that shift? The question touched on something Maya had been contemplating since the Norway conference. Her greatest impact wouldn't come from personally teaching as many people as possible, but from creating systems that could extend her methods far beyond her direct reach. I am, she replied. It's time to trust others with this knowledge, to let it evolve beyond my personal approach. That's real leadership, Webb observed. Knowing when to develop systems larger than yourself. The following months saw the launch of the National Integrated Navigation Instructor Program. Maya personally trained the first cohort of 30 master instructors selected from parks across the country. These individuals would, in turn, train rangers and outdoor educators in their respective regions. The approach maintained the program's adaptive quality while creating exponential reach. By focusing on principles and relationships rather than rigid techniques, the training preserved what made the original program effective while allowing for regional customization. 1 year after the White House ceremony, Maya found herself in a position she had never anticipated, leading a national movement that extended far beyond the wilderness navigation niche where it had begun. The principles of integrated knowledge, balancing technology with traditional methods, developing multiple redundant systems, cultivating direct perception, had applications far beyond finding one's way in the wilderness. Schools were incorporating these approaches into STEM education. Emergency management agencies were adopting them for disaster resilience planning. Even corporate leadership programs were exploring the balance between data-driven decision-making and experiential wisdom. On the anniversary of the program's national recognition, Maya returned to Montana, not for an official event, but for a personal pilgrimage. She hiked alone into the mountains where her grandmother had first taught her to read the land, carrying only a small pack with minimal equipment. The autumn air was crisp, golden aspen leaves quivering in the afternoon light. She navigated without GPS or even compass, using only the landscape features and natural indicators she'd observed since childhood. Near sunset, she reached the high meadow where she and her grandmother had spent countless hours identifying stars, tracking weather patterns, and developing the deep relationship with place that had ultimately saved 43 lives during the Yellowstone blizzard. Maya sat on a sun-warmed rock, gazing across valleys painted in autumn colors. Here, away from conferences and curricula and recognition, she reconnected with the essence of what she taught, not just techniques for finding direction, but a way of being in relationship with the world. Her phone, which she carried for emergency purposes only, buzzed with an incoming message. Normally she would ignore it in this sacred place, but something prompted her to check. The message was from Commander Blackwell at Denali. Thought you should know, family of 5. Lost in early snowstorm yesterday. 2 ranger teams trained in your methods found them using natural navigation after their emergency beacon failed. Everyone's safe. Your grandmother's wisdom lives on in places she never visited. Maya smiled, tucking the phone away and returning her attention to the landscape. As twilight deepened into darkness, The stars emerged, the same stars that had guided humans for thousands of years before satellites, the same stars her grandmother had taught her to use as the most reliable navigation system of all. In that moment, Maya understood the true measure of her work. It wasn't in White House ceremonies or international recognition. It wasn't even in the thousands of wilderness professionals now trained in integrated navigation. It was in that family, strangers to her, who had returned safely from a blizzard because rangers knew how to read the land when technology failed. It was in hikers who now noticed moss patterns and cloud formations as they walked forest trails. It was in the renewed relationship between humans and landscapes, a relationship as old as humanity itself, but nearly forgotten in the digital age. As the Milky Way stretched across the Montana sky, Maya gave silent thanks to her grandmother and all the wisdom keepers who had preserved these knowledge systems when they were dismissed as primitive or irrelevant. The night sky above her wasn't just beautiful. It was useful, practical, life-saving for those who knew how to read it. Some heroes rush into blizzards to rescue strangers. Others rebuild lost relationships between humans and the natural world. Both save lives, both preserve what's precious. And sometimes, if they're very fortunate, both get to see their work blossom beyond anything they could have accomplished alone. In the end, Maya reflected, true navigation isn't about finding your location on a map. It's about finding your place in the world and helping others find theirs, with or without technology to light the way. Excellence doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to be ready when the world finally recognizes its value. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.